All right, we are live. So it's Dr. Casey Pride here, and I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Fred Didomenico. And as usual, whenever we have these conversations, my goal is to give you guys great information that you can use to make better decisions for your health, for yourself, for your family, and to make those decisions from an informed and grounded place. I love to have conversations with people who are just experts in their field, or people who really inspire me. And Dr. Fred happens to be both of those things. He's a doctor, he's a healer, and he's also the author of a book that I really love called "You Are More Powerful Than You Think." And Dr. Fred, I'm excited to talk to you, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I think, just looking at your introduction and listening to your introduction, I think if there's any time in the world that people need to be more rooted and grounded, living from an inside out perspective, it definitely has to be right now. I mean, if you identify with anything outside, meaning you consider yourself associated with any of these conditions, then it's just going to be an internal hurricane.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads me into my first question for you, man. And right now we're living in a world that is there's so much tension, there's so much frustration. Things are just so polarized at the moment. And it's like anytime you make a decision, no matter where it's from, it seems like you're making a statement. And how do you, in this world right now, how do you really ground in love and sort of face what's going on from a loving, grounded place?
Well, I would answer that question with I wrote the book, You're More Powerful Than You Think. And what it does, it introduces the 6-step system. It's called HEALED. And that starts with the premise that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So if we believe that, now there's another premise, and that is if you live what you believe, and that's true, then the real question is, are your belief systems getting you what you want? And that's really it. So we get to choose our belief systems. So, and that's why I started with this with your introduction. If you're not anchored with what your core values and your belief systems are inside you, then you're going to be swayed with your belief systems outside you. And that's when things become a problem. And Deepak Chopra in 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, he talks about having an outside reference point versus an inside reference point, self-referral versus object referral. Meaning object referral, if you identify with your house or the economy or what's going on, and you make that your identity, you're going to be subject. Things outside change so much, a very fragile identity. But when you have a self, that's a capital S identity, meaning we know who we are, that we are divinity first, that things on the outside, everything changes, but what's inside doesn't change. And that's where our real strength and our rooting is. So in the HEALED system, which that system was downloaded to me, by the way, it's a spiritually based system, helps you tap into who you really are, who God created you to be, if you want to use that vocabulary, why you're here, to be able to clear of your past, to be able to have such a strong grounding inside that no matter what's going on outside, that you don't lose your identity from the inside out, and you find and live your soul, SOUL purpose. And with that, the first E in HEALED is exercise loving yourself and others. So how do you stay in love? Love is a consciousness. And that's the first thing to understand, because if you're looking for love outside today, I would think almost more than ever, other than like in the Civil War or, with racism, there's such division that can happen just over whether or not you wear a mask. I mean, the slightest thing today can cause such extreme polarity that if you identify with that, then how can you actually love yourself or even begin to understand our highest principle in consciousness is oneness? The highest consciousness is unity. And that's what's being divided, whether you want to call it by an outside condition like a virus, which we know a lot more than that it's not, but by the people, organizations that want to create division right now. So how do you do it? Well, you have to have, if you're not doing it on your own, then have outside influences and develop daily habits to become a lifestyle that help you develop that consciousness. I mean, We have a whole system on it. There's a book on it, You're More Powerful Than You Think. You can go to yourmorepowerful.com, whatever spiritual reference point. But your grounding, and this is my opinion, is within yourself. Love is a level of consciousness. And when you realize that we're created in love, we're life force energy, that we are divinity having human experience, that we are a spirit here in a physical plane, here to fulfill a soul purpose, you become solid in that. You become solid in your core values. You have an inside out reference point, and then you're able to find what that purpose is. That is how you walk through the world, and that is how you walk through conditions, right? I was raised Christian, so I'm not teaching religion, but if we can use spiritual principles, Psalm 23, we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So, Psalm 21, 1,000 fall at our left hand, 10,000 at our right. We watch the reward of the wicked. No arrow by night, no plague by day. I'm paraphrasing. Shall come upon us. So those are inside out principles that realize no matter what happens in the world, this is temporary. What's inside me, he that's inside me is greater than anything than he that's outside of me. I'm paraphrasing. And when you have that internal strength, then love becomes the product, because that's really who you are. Because you understand whatever's outside of me, I'm bigger. God is bigger. The path and my soul purpose is already there. I can walk the path, and it doesn't matter what happens outside me. We're so convicted on what you are here to do, and only you are here to do, that you are protected, that you're guided, that you can hear the whispers of your innate divinity inside you telling you exactly what to do. And in Deuteronomy, it says, my enemies come one way, but they flee 7 ways. So that the path is already done. I can walk it in joy and in love, and can illuminate. And basically, with that illumination is how you influence people. It's how you fulfill your soul purpose, because nothing outside of you can shake what's inside of you. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That absolutely answers it, man. There are so many good nuggets there. And and if you're watching this and something Dr. Fred resonates with you, I encourage you to just comment on what that is. Share this with whoever you feel needs to really hear this information, because that was just solid gold. Can you expand a little more on that healed system that you were talking about, the 6-step process?
Yeah, well, first of all, I was practicing chiropractic for 15 years, so it's important to know the origin. When people used to come up to me, they're like, God, you're always so happy, you're always so positive, because you know what your purpose is. And I would go, yeah, I'm so grateful for that. And I would feel compassion, because people would say, I don't know what my purpose is. Although they're in a job, they have a family, and yes, their purpose, part of that is to raise a family, but they often weren't in the careers or whatever. So, and then, my second marriage, my wife developed cancer, and 3 weeks before she died, medicine definitely was not very successful with that, even though she chose that, but that's another story. 3 weeks before she died, she was taking a bath, and we're sitting here discussing how she wanted her service. So that's a fairly intense conversation. And then all of a sudden she started sobbing. I mean, not crying. She was sobbing out loud. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she said, I don't know if I did what I was supposed to do with my life. And the amount of the weight of the sadness that I felt at that moment, I can't put into words. And the contrast was, at the same time, I knew I was on my purpose. And then I had a very loud voice in my head say, no one in my life will ever say that to me again. And so then after she passed, I began on this spiritual journey for me to really discover and live who God created me to be and what my purpose was. And then 5 years later, it fell on me. I was actually trying to write a rehab system for chiropractors. So I wanted to create an acronym. I wanted to trademark a spinal rehabilitation system, and the acronym HEALED fell on me. I mean, literally, I did not think of it. It came to me. And then all of a sudden, the next thing that came to me, I said, wow, this is a spiritually based and emotional healing system. That's all I knew. I didn't know what the letters meant. And then I just started praying, and then it started coming to me. And so H is honor God within yourself. We have to realize we're divine first. then once you can experience that divinity, I created well, I didn't create it, but I had to live it to write it. It took me 9 years. 9 years. I probably rewrote that book 9 to 12 times, because as I was going through it, I was learning more and experiencing and living it. It completely transformed. It helped me let go of all the pain. I mean, I can go through all the pains, but I'm not going to go through that. Help me release it to really discover myself. So once you know your divinity, then E is exercise loving yourself and others. Now it's funny because when I started that chapter, I would have no idea what I would write in any of those chapters, but I knew I had to live it to write it. So I would pray, and I started that chapter with, if I asked yourself if you loved yourself, what would you say? And then I thought of that. And then the next sentence that came out, I did not think of, but I just wrote it without even any thought in my mind. And it said, if I asked you if you love yourself like God loves you, what would you say? I put a period at the end of that sentence. I read that sentence and I said to myself, I have no idea what that's like. And then I prayed. It's like, you're going to have to show me, because I don't know. I don't know that. And that one chapter took me almost a year to write, because I had to live it. But after I wrote that chapter, I had let go of so much. And then A is forgiveness, accepting. Once you love yourself, once you love yourself, you get above the shame and the guilt. And so then I teach you how to look at your past and realize that every pain has a gift. Everything that happened in your life is leading you toward your soul purpose. My most painful experience, by far and above, exponentially great than any other pain, and we've all had pains, was watching my wife take her last breath. But what was the gift? Now there's a spiritually based coaching system that can help 7.5 billion people across the world discover why they're walking on this planet in a human body. So, but once I loved myself, that only took me 4 months. And then once you get rid of the emotional noise, you can come into presence. That's present time moment, meaning I'm not anxious about the future, my past. I'm not bringing my past into my present, projecting fear and anxiety in the future that I'm running around stressed and anxious. So once you get that, you can hear the whispers of your divinity. Then the next is establish purpose and mission. Once you can hear the whispers, all of a sudden you see everything in my life has led me to this moment. Everything that's happening in my life now is revealing what my purpose is. And then once you get on that, then D is deliver it to the world. What are the spiritual principles of actually delivering it to the world? So D is not a business thing. There's lots of business seminars you can go to that specialize in that, but there are spiritual principles, like David facing Goliath. If you look at David was a shepherd, and he says, I killed a lion and a bear. He had to protect his flock. But while he was protecting his flock, he would sing and praise God. And if any predators would try and take a sheep, he would kill them with a sling. So what he's doing, he's developing skill. He never lost faith. So God doesn't call the qualified. He was just a shepherd, right? But by the time he stepped up and Goliath was there, he was the least of the soldiers, but he was the most faithful and the most confident. And so he gets called out, and basically, I'm paraphrasing, he says, who is this Philistine? Like, I don't care how big it is. They try and put armor on him and he takes it off. He's like, I don't need your worldly armor. So Goliath calls him, like, come closer. He's like, I'm not going to fight this giant toe to toe. He's got a mid-range weapon, but he already established the skill and the mindset and the faith to say, it doesn't matter how big you are. My God is bigger than you. And I have a weapon, and he takes Goliath out. So he was qualified. God qualified him, but he wasn't the most talented, but he was the most faithful, the most committed. And that's what it takes when you're fulfilling your purpose, because you will face more than one Goliath.
I love it, man. And that reminds me of the saying that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And
yeah, thank God, right? It's like, hey, I may not be the most talented. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've noticed that in my own life, where it's like, there are times when my biggest opportunities, holy cow, I have not felt ready for. It's like, you're pulled into the deep end and it's just, all right, stepping into it and being in it and learning while you're there is a huge part of the process. You don't get to, there's some things you just can't learn until you do it.
Well, not only that, it's like how many days of your life do you feel like I'm just not qualified to do this? Besides a lot of them.
Yeah.
Is that feels like most of them, because when your vision is so big, one thing I say in coaching is your vision and your purpose should be so big that you can't do it on your own. That's how you know it's your purpose, that you actually need to be faithful. You need the universe moving through you. You need God. You're dependent on it. And that's how you know that you're on your purpose. So that means every day you wake up, you already know that you're not qualified, but you will be qualified.
And now, what do you think holds most people back from really stepping into that power?
I had about 20 things just go through my mind right away. So that shows you how many things get in the way, but it's really one thing. It's the 18-inch journey. It's the longest, shortest journey from your head to your heart, because your mind, when you understand that your mind is a tool, it's not your identity. And we talk about this in the You're More Powerful system. Go to yourmorepowerful.com. And that is your mind, your primary, most foundational and human instinct is survival. So your mind wants to solve problems. It wants you to survive. It likes what's known. That's why your mind keeps repeating the past. It likes what's known. So your mind automatically doesn't want you to take risk, because risk means you're threatening your survival from your mind's perspective. Right? So when you have a vision that's bigger than you are, your mind's going to tell you 8 million things of why you can't do it. And that's why you have to go from your mind to your heart. That's why you have to realize your mind is a tool. It's not my identity. It may have thoughts that tell me what I can and can't do, but my spirit is bigger. I know I'm connected. I know that God is with me. I know that that my spirit and my heart controls my mind doesn't control my heart. My spirit controls my mind doesn't control my spirit. And when you understand that, then first of all, you are far more powerful than you think.
Yeah, I love it, man. So when you coach chiropractors, because I know you do a lot of coaching with your elite coaching group, how do these intertwine? Because I mean, you started as a practicing chiropractor, you developed this healed system. How do they link up?
Well, what I found when I started coaching chiropractors is I could show them the systems, but they couldn't do it because they didn't have the mindset. And that's when I usually wear my shirt, Mindset Master. We have seminars that teach a lot of mindset stuff. So I always say mindset first, then systems. So that's if you're a parent in a family or as an individual, right? It's always you only ever have one problem, and that's your level of consciousness. And so every entrepreneur, business owner, healer, whatever, you can only attain the level in life, and this is anybody, according to your level of consciousness. So if we look at the metaphor like an eagle, an eagle flies at lower altitude, and then if they're eating something on the ground, what happens? A bunch of crows and other fish and other birds come around, and, at lower altitude, they're pecking on its tail. Like crows will peck on the tail of an eagle, even though an eagle is far more powerful, right? But when they fly, and that's a level of consciousness. So a lower level of consciousness, you always have problems pecking on your tail. But when eagles fly at a higher altitude, there's not a bird that flies at that altitude. That's analogous to a level of consciousness. When you get at a higher consciousness, you don't have those small problems anymore. You're above it. So a lower consciousness, you're immersed in small problems. And then how can you ever achieve your purpose? So I tie spirituality into what we teach in the chiropractic, because we get these doctors that have a vision. They have a message for humanity. You have to be a leader on a team. The lowest consciousness of your team member is going to determine how you fulfill your business. And this is why businesses today use culture as their primary strategy. in my opinion, to raise your culture, have a soul, S-O-U-L, purpose culture. And that's what we teach. We actually teach a soul purpose culture, because when we raise the consciousness, you get above the small problems. And now when you are into that, a higher consciousness, your mind has different thoughts. You transcend limitation. Greater qualities come out of you that were dormant, that you never knew but you had before, because they're not conscious at a lower level. But all of a sudden, all your innate gifts start coming out. Your thoughts are different. You innovate at a different level, and you take everything in your culture to another level, as well as become a greater leader.
Mm-hmm. That's great, man. And I was just in church earlier this week, and our pastor said something that really resonated with me. And he said that you need to have 3 types of people in your life. And I want to get your thought on this. And he said you need to have a Paul or Pauls, and that's someone who you can kind of look to for guidance, mentorship, someone who can really pour into you. You need to have a Barnabas, who's someone sort of at your level, right? And then you also need Timothys, which are people who you mentor, who you pour into. I'm a believer that the people you surround yourself with have a massive impact on your success and on how you show up in the world. What is the right balance of sort of surrounding yourself with those people who can support you, and also sort of also giving and providing to the people who really want to get to where you are?
Well, I can't say that I would totally agree with your pastor, although I understand his message, because I think there's plenty of Barnabases in the world. You don't need to have a Barnabas. They're going to be everywhere anyway. It just depends how much attention you pay to them, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are everywhere. I don't think you necessarily need them on your team. The Timothys, I think, are, as a visionary, that's the team that you create, that the leader and visionary has to be able to articulate the purpose of the culture in a way that inspires other people. You know what I mean? To step up and be their best. So I think those are the Timothys. However, at some point, you don't want to have to be teaching them and raising them all the time. Otherwise, that becomes an energetic anchor as well. So Timothy became a leader, right? But all the apostles had to learn, and they had to live it. They were immersed in it. And so obviously the Pauls are like the evangelists. Pauls would be the visionary, and every culture needs a visionary. The challenge is the visionary is not always a very good mechanic, because the visionary has the vision, right? And they're not always a good mechanic. So you need the Timothys to carry out the systems so the vision actually manifests in the physical world. But the Pauls are not great Timothys. And I think Barnabas fracture your culture from the inside out. They're all out there. You don't have to look very far to find a Barnabas.
Gotcha. Well, man, I do want to change gears a little bit, because you got letters in front of your name here, and we are in the middle of a situation worldwide where a health issue has probably become the most relevant political issue as well. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on COVID, the seriousness, how the government's responded to it. Where do you land on that?
Well, we're doctors, right? And so the whole thing boils down to one thing: science. What's the science say? And because that's really the only grounding and footing. And then you have to look at what are the independent sources? What are the independent sources of science that don't have any financial, political, or personal gain? And that's where we look. And the science is overwhelming that COVID is not what is being told on mainstream media. And then you say, okay, if there's so much inconsistency, and then even mainstream media, well, this, mask, it's just like Fauci said in March, or even way back in January, masks don't work. We don't need to wear masks. Well, why in the summer, if the coronavirus doesn't live over 70 degrees, if the death rate is so minimal, if the CDC already got busted in multiple states combining antibody tests with positive COVID tests, which that's science. Like the CDC got busted for that. And the CDC is supposed to determine what politicians do. How could the most important study that would determine the economy and the political decisions screw up like that? Because there's another agenda, and so the science doesn't match what government's doing. And if the science doesn't match, it's illegal. And then you look at constitutional rights. So I belong to an organism called FTBA, Freedom to Breathe Agency. And we are an organization that help people. We give them information. Education and advocacy are the two purposes, where we give them information on your God-given human and constitutional rights. So we're associated with a constitutional law group. That's actually what they're called. And what's being done is illegal. And constitutional law is the highest law. There's no science to back it. So now there's contradiction. And they're actually felony and civil offenses. And multiple governors are having lawsuits being drawn against them as we speak. So how do we look at this? There's no science to back anything that we're doing. Now, because there's no science, they're actually breaking the law. Now there's constitutional law and civil rights, federal and state civil rights acts. So you're breaking constitutional law, you're overreaching your governmental and lawful authority, and you're breaking Constitution, federal and civil rights acts. These are felony and civil crimes. So what's being done is felonious to the general public. Now, depending on the sources that the general public's watching, or possibly even their political party, then it's creating different belief systems. And now we have division. But all of it is unlawful. And what you will see is political officials being convicted of crimes.
So what can people be doing? Because I mean, so many people, they ask me, what can I do? Especially out here in California, where we have one of those governors who's been more on the restrictive side. What can people do right now to help to push back on some of this stuff if it's unlawful?
Well, push back and what they can do are different. So what they can do to push back is I would get in touch. What's that?
However you want to answer it. I mean, what can people do?
Well, first of all, you need the right information. So this is no secret that mainstream media is funded. Their largest funding source are pharmaceutical companies. So the first thing to do is learn the independent science about the coronavirus. And it's stuff like, hey, there are plenty of videos. There's plenty of things on social media. The information is right in front of you, but you have to be able to search it out. And so there is a political agenda. There's lots of science out there. Now, the next thing is to understand your constitutional rights. It would be join the FTBA. Go to ftbagency.com. Go to FTB, Freedom to Breathe Agency, and be a part of a group that actually are sharing all this information. Go to FTB Agency on Facebook, like that page, and get in a group that has the information, and just look at it with an open mind, and you're going to see the contradiction. If you feel your rights are being violated, or you're a business owner, we're developing packages working with Constitutional Law Group. It is unlawful for any government agency to lock down your business. They can't legally do it. So, and all these fines for not wearing masks, and this is all illegal. So know the science of coronavirus and know what your legal rights are. And this isn't hard to find, but get in an organization that is doing this work for you. And that would be the FTB Agency. Now, I make videos all the time. Go to You're More Powerful Than You Think Facebook page. You can like Dr. Fred Didomenico because we're putting information. Obviously, you're doing this. Go to Highwire with Del Bigtree, right? There are many, many sources that if you listen with an open mind, that you're going to become very empowered.
I love it, man. Well, I got one more question for you that I'm going to give you the last word. You said with there, and I don't want to mix your words up, but you said something along the lines of, with every hurt, with every pain, there's a gift.
Yes.
What's the gift in all this?
The gift is there's so much being exposed that has been going on almost since the Declaration of Independence has been made, right? We know the people with all the money are controlling all the money, and they're controlling things, right? And I don't even need to get into all that. However, what's happening is the consciousness of the universe is rising. And so the old paradigm is going away, and we're creating a new paradigm. But for the old paradigm to be dispelled, we're going to go through some pains. We're going to go through some transition. The people who have been controlling the country and the money, and the people that want the new world order and all these things that all the conspiracy theorists have been called conspiracy theorists, they're in their heyday now, right? Because they're like, look, I've been talking about this for 30 years, right? So that's the whole thing, is pay attention, have an open mind, but we are transitioning into a better new world with a higher consciousness, and it will happen. And then I always say 2 words that whenever I'm facing something really great is God. 3 words: God always wins. The truth's like, what else do we hear? The truth always prevails. Mm-hmm. So you can't go against universal laws and win. And so the darkness is coming out because it's calling for us to illuminate it. Darkness cannot exist in the light. So are you looking at darkness as your enemy? Or is you looking at our light is so strong that the darkness is coming to us to be defined by us, right? The darkness is coming to us to be illuminated, because the highest order is illumination. The highest consciousness is oneness and unity, and anything less than that cannot prevail. And that's where we are moving. So division has to exist so it can be eliminated. If it doesn't come into our consciousness, then we can't correct it. So it's coming to us to be illuminated. And the illuminated ones are the empowered ones. And that's every person that's on this podcast right now.
I love it, man. Gosh, so there's so much solid gold. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch this again when we're done. I'm going to give you the last word, man. What do you think the world needs to know? What do they need to hear right now?
That you're a spiritual being first. Now think about this. You are eternal. You were never born. You'll never die. You came into this body, and the body was born, and you will pass. So the question is, at what point, do we have to wait for our anatomical eyes to close before we realize our spiritual eyes have always been open? And if we can see through those eyes now, then we are going to live at a different level, at a different consciousness. You will know and live and fulfill your soul purpose. And that is the most fulfilling life. It's not always an easy life, but easy is relative. It is the most joyful, rewarding life. So do you want to live an easy life or a rewarding, fulfilling life, knowing that you are leaving an energetic impression in the world? You are leaving an energetic vibrational footprint. Every second you are here in the physical body, what footprint do you want to leave? And when you decide that I want to leave one, that the world is different because we were here in some way, even if it's our own world, then do you want to raise your consciousness? And if you don't know how, go to yourmorepowerful.com. There's all the tools. There's all the tools right there. Now, will you have to invest in yourself? Time, energy, maybe financially. Are you willing to do what it takes to live your life in a way that when those anatomical eyes are ready to close, that you are so joyful and excited because your spiritual eyes are already open? Now you get to transfer onto a different plane and realize that you always have been, you always will be. And now let's move in a different energy.
Dr. Fred, thanks, man. This was so good, and I'm excited for everyone watching. And if you're watching and you know someone who needs to hear this, which I'm sure you do, I know I do, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. And Dr. Fred, I want to thank you for having this conversation, man. I love you, brother.
Yeah, my pleasure. Love you too, Casey.
We'll have to do this again.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. You take care, and everybody else, have a great day.
All right. Thanks.